You know that feeling when you read something that seems simple, but you just get this sense that there's way more going on underneath? Well, that's the Gospel of John. It's packed with these famous stories, these incredible miracles, but they're not just stories. They're part of a code, a hidden message about who Jesus really is. So let's get into it. Let's decode the signs of John.
And this ancient saying, it just nails it. The stories are simple enough for a child to understand on one level, but the theological ideas, whoa, they're deep enough for an elephant to swim in. See, John is writing on multiple levels at once, and if you want to get it, you have to realize that in his world, not all belief is created equal.
And right here, this is the central mystery we're going to tackle. It says that in Jerusalem, after seeing his miracles, many believed in his name. Awesome, right? But the very next verse says, Jesus did not entrust himself to them. Wait, what? How does that even work? Why would Jesus literally reject someone's belief in him?
To get to the bottom of this, we've got to dig into a concept that some scholars, like Dr. Robert Peterson, call inadequate faith. It's this fascinating idea that, yeah, it's totally possible to believe in Jesus, but for all the wrong reasons.
So what is this inadequate faith? Well, think of it as a faith that's basically addicted to the spectacle. The crowds in Jerusalem, they saw Jesus as this amazing miracle worker, kind of like a magician who could do impossible things. They believed in what he did, but they weren't ready to trust in who he was based on his word alone. And for Jesus, that just wasn't the real thing. Now, check out the contrast John gives us here. It's brilliant. On one side, you've got the Jerusalem crowds. They see the signs, they say they believe, but Jesus keeps them at arm's length. But then you've got the Samaritans. They believe simply because of what Jesus says. His word is enough. They didn't need a miracle. They just listened to him speak, and they came to this incredible conclusion. He is the Savior of the world. That is the gold standard of faith in the Gospel of John. Okay, so let's see this whole idea in action. Our first case study is the story of a royal official, and it's a perfect example of the kind of faith Jesus was actually looking for.
So picture this. An official's son is dying. He's desperate. He begs Jesus to come and heal him. But instead, Jesus throws out this public challenge. It's a test. He doesn't go with the man. He just gives a simple command. Go, your son will live. And here's the crucial part. The official doesn't demand proof. He doesn't say, "Are you sure?" He simply takes Jesus at his word and starts walking home. That's it. That's the faith that's based on radical trust, not on sight.
But hold on. The signs weren't just about inspiring the right kind of faith. Oh no. They were also designed to spark conflict, to force people to make a choice. And no story shows this better than the healing of the man at the pool. This wasn't just a healing. This was basically a declaration of war.
And to really feel the impact of this story, you have to get your head around this number: 38 years. This man wasn't just sick for a few weeks. He'd been an invalid for almost 4 decades. That is a lifetime of suffering, a lifetime of hopelessness, just waiting for something to change.
And then Jesus heals him. Instantly. After 38 years, the guy just picks up his mat and walks. The response should have been a citywide party, right? Nope. The religious authorities immediately launch an investigation. Not into the mind-blowing miracle, but into the fact that this guy had the nerve to carry his mat on the Sabbath. It just shows you their priorities were completely upside down. They were so focused on the tiny rule, they totally missed the life-changing miracle.
So when they confront Jesus about it, he drops an absolute bombshell. He says, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." Now to us that might sound a little cryptic, but to them, they knew exactly what he was saying. This wasn't just about the Sabbath anymore. They understood this as a direct claim of being equal with God. And that's the moment a simple healing becomes a capital crime. From that point on, they're actively trying to kill him.
Okay, so if the signs produce both genuine faith and murderous rage, what is their ultimate purpose? What's the point? Well, this is where we get to the core of the code. Every single sign in John's Gospel is a clue. They're all pointing to specific truths about Jesus' identity. They're what you might call revelatory miracles. Just take a look at this breakdown. You start to see a pattern, right? When Jesus heals the official's son or the lame man, the sign is revealing him as the life giver. When he feeds 5,000 people or raises Lazarus from the dead, same message. He's the life giver. Rescuing the disciples from the storm at sea, he's the savior. Healing the man born blind, he is the revealer of truth. See, each sign is like another chapter on his divine resume.
And this chart just drives that point home. It's impossible to miss. When you look at the signs John chose to highlight, there's one overwhelming theme. 2/3 of them aren't just about power in general. They are specifically designed to shout one single message. Jesus is the one who gives life. That's the main thing he wants you to know.
But there's one more layer to this whole thing. One final piece of the puzzle. These signs, the conflicts they created, the truths they revealed, none of it happened by accident. John makes it crystal clear that all of this is unfolding according to a very specific divine timetable.
Seriously, nothing is random. How many times does Jesus say something like, "My time is not yet come"? He's operating on the Father's schedule. He avoids a fight when it's not the right moment, and he provokes one when it is. Everything is leading toward one specific, appointed hour. And this verse from John chapter 7 is the ultimate proof. His enemies are right there. They want to arrest him, they've got the motive, they've got the means, but they literally cannot touch him. Why? Because, as John puts it, his hour had not yet come. It's like he was protected by this divine clock that was still ticking down. So what have we seen? In the Gospel of John, miracles are never just miracles. They're signs pointing to a much deeper identity. They're designed to push us toward a deeper kind of faith. And it all unfolds according to a divine schedule. Which of course leaves us with one big final thought. If the point of the signs was never really the spectacle, but the meaning behind the spectacle, what does that suggest about where we should be looking for meaning in the events of our own lives?